Who made up the rules on how we should deal with grief? The truth is, every type of grief is unique to the individual, and every grief that you experience in life is going to also be as unique as your relationship and your love and connection to the person that you've lost. Buddha said life is suffering, and the way to escape suffering is to embrace impermanence. And what he really meant by that is that while we can't avoid or remove certain things in our lives, we can learn to be present with them and to keep our hearts and our minds open in the experience of what it means to be human. Learning to be present with your pain, learning to sit with the pain is essential. It's important to turn inward, to acknowledge and honor what it is that you're experiencing. So the first thing to understand is whatever you're feeling, you're absolutely right. The truth is, there's no right or wrong. We may have psychological and medical models for what grief should look like and the processes and stages of grief, but the reality is that this is your experience. There is nothing anybody can do. There is no textbook or manual or medical diagnosis that is going to tell you what you're experiencing is normal. It's not normal. You have loved and you have lost. And the best that we can do is understand the differences between understanding the pain and the rawness and the reality of dealing with grief and learning how to deal with that or cope with that in some way instead of avoiding it. And then also the difference between suffering. Suffering can be significantly reduced or eliminated altogether. This is where some tools and strategies can help, but in the early stages, not a single tool or strategy is going to help. You need to give yourself time. In the early stages of grief, we are in shock, and this shock can last for weeks to months to years for some people. This is your journey. You need to honor yourself and honor your experience. Having a toolkit given to you and handed to you does not work. This is where you need to be the driving force of your own life and find what works for you. Or some people may take to certain strategies. What works for them is not going to work for you. This is an explorative journey. It's a journey to know thyself in a much deeper way. It's also a journey to find your connection to Source or to God or to the divine, whatever your language is. And it's also a journey in honoring the totality of the love and the energy and the connection that you have with that soul that has passed over. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a very famous book on the 5 stages of grief. Now, in her later years, she actually kind of regretted the way that it was being used. And I think this is important to understand because if you're going through grief, it's natural for other people in your life to try and tell you that what you're experiencing is normal, that there's a formula, that there's a stage that you're going to go through. The truth is those stages are not linear, and there's more than just 5 stages. This is, as I said earlier, a unique experience that you're going to have to learn to navigate as best you can. And again, there's no right or wrong to what you're experiencing or feeling. I think it's really, really important that you are kind to yourself, that you allow the pain to be, as excruciating as that loss is. Over time, the heart does heal. I think one of the big issues that happens to a lot of people is that they shut down from love. They go into self-protection. And while you're going to do that in those early stages, I think it helps to understand that there is an integration that actually needs to happen between your mind and your body and your heart space. This is where the coherence over time will actually come back into some sort of rhythm. There is not going to be a state of ever going back to how life was. There is no way that your life is ever going to be the same. And I think that has to be something that we come to some level of acceptance instead of avoidance. And I think often for people that are trying to support people through grief, there are a number of massive mistakes that they make, which we'll get to later. And, you know, the reality is this is a journey. There's nothing that's going to take this away from you. This is something that you have to lean into. This is something that you have to give yourself huge permission to actually feel and experience. One of the big things that often happens is that we turn away from our feelings. We're in a society today where we are trained by nature, through the media, through our clumsy societies to avoid pain and seek pleasure at every cost. And this is where often addiction and self-sabotage can kick in as we're going through a journey such as the grief experience. So just be aware that in today's society, it's normal for us to wrong what we're experiencing, to make ourselves wrong in some way or other people wrong when we're trying to avoid this pain that we're experiencing. The truth is it can't be avoided, and what we suppress, we end up perpetuating over time. It can halt our journey of recovery back to a wholehearted way of living. It's also going to keep us entangled into self-sabotage patterns over time as well. So I'm going to cover some of the things that we're going to experience through our grief process. And my soulful wish for you is that you come up with your own rules of how this experience is for you, how you deal with it or not deal with it, and find an equilibrium where there's no right or wrong, there's no polarity to be had. This is not about being in grief, sitting in the corner rocking, right? And it's not about being in the other polarity, which is, I've healed, I've moved on. Truth is, those areas are opportunities between this world that we live in of black and white, one or the other. These two options that we're often given around grief are wrong. We have to find a middle ground where we learn to live with the experience that we're going through and the long-term consequences, and the compassion and understanding that our life will never be the same again, and that's actually okay. In the early stages of grief, if this is a matter of weeks or months for you, the mind is in shock, the body is in shock, your whole neurobiology is screaming, it's going offline. It's normal to experience memory loss, brain fog, confusion. Tasks that you usually do easily will become a struggle. It's also normal to kind of check out of things that don't matter. Some of the basic needs that we have, like eating or eating too much, sleeping or sleeping too much, all of those biorhythms are going to go out of whack because your nervous system is currently really, really overloaded. And so again, what you may be experiencing in your daily life is going to be totally normal, and it's just a matter of riding those waves and allowing the emotion to be. Emotion stands for energy and motion. When we think a thought, our nervous system activates and fires our neural pathways to resort to memories and often levels of protection and safety. So as we're experiencing something like grief, our brain is firing on constant alert. There is a number of things that we often do, and one of them is to default back into rumination, right? Rumination of the last time we were with our loved one. If only I'd said this, if only I did that. We often can take on some self-responsibility in that, and that can drop us into guilt. It can sometimes even drop us into shame. Again, compassion is the antidote to this. We're always doing our best in this human experience. None of us are perfect, right? We can't go back into the past. And this is one of the things that actually causes us deep suffering through our grief journey. Rumination, living in the past, what I should have done, what I should have said, could have I prevented this in some way, taking on some level of self-responsibility. It's not your fault. And by ruminating, you might find yourself dropping into some form of depression. Anxiety is another issue that often people dealing with grief naturally go into. Situations such as death come out of nowhere. It's not enough for us to say, oh, think positively, get out your self-help book in these situations, right? Because during this process, you've already lived or you're currently living through the worst case scenario. So no amount of self-help, no amount of positive thinking is going to alleviate the anxiety that you may be feeling of fear or worrying about the future, or as life is currently right now. But anxiety to a certain degree is also, as is suffering, an optional experience. We can't change what might happen in the future. If we all of a sudden drop into fear and anxiety around situations in the future because we've had this trauma in our lives, this is really important to understand. We are wired for safety. Our nervous system is wired to keep us safe. So if anxiety is a symptom that you're dealing with, understand that it's normal, it's natural, but there are things you can do to alleviate chronic anxiety. Distract yourself, find cues in your environment that might help you shift those ruminating thoughts. And a lot of people have said in the past, worrying is like praying for something that we do not want. Now, this is one of the issues with anxiety. We often create a cycle with this that becomes self-perpetuating. It's like, okay, I know I have this anxiety and now I'm focused on this anxiety and anxiety is wrong and I am going to create a catastrophe around anxiety because I'm anxious, and the cycle perpetuates. It's not what we need to be focused on. It's natural, it's normal. Give yourself a break, let yourself know that it's okay, right? The secret here is to be aware of your anxiety, to feel those feelings and do whatever you can to shift states and find another mode of being in that moment. One of the mistakes I think we make often when we are going through a shared grief is that we compare our grief and our experience to others. This was my partner, this was my child, this was my daughter or son, or this was my friend. And so therefore what often happens in families is there becomes this emotional kind of trauma that starts perpetuating the situation by righting and wronging each other's individual journeys and experiences. Again, when somebody passes away, there's not just you that's involved with the situation. There is a whole family unit and friendship group that are dealing with the same type of thing. And again, that is as unique as your fingerprint. It is as unique as your love and connection, your relationship with that person. And one of the big mistakes I think that families make is they get into this kind of hierarchical, my grief's worse than yours. Another mistake on that same note is that often when we're supporting somebody in grief, it's natural and normal for some people to kind of drop into their own grief experiences or their own journeys with grief. Again, wrong. We can't give anybody unsolicited advice. It doesn't help. Nothing's going to take this excruciating pain away from somebody, particularly in those early stages. And what you want to avoid is getting into a distraction where you're no longer holding space for somebody's individual journey. You're now making it about you, making it about your story. And one of the big things that we understand in psychology, and particularly in relationship to empathy, is that when we are around somebody that's going through a grief experience, through the energetic fields, we're able to connect and link into the emotion or the energy of what that person is experiencing. So we do have this energetic connection to people, and often that energetic connection when somebody is suffering, it's very natural and normal for people to want to go in and save and rescue and do whatever they can to band-aid or help or soothe that person. That is an issue. That's an issue in every situation in life, not just in terms of grief, because we're all individual souls having a very, very individual experience. And part of life is our individuality in terms of how we learn and grow and experience and the meaning of what we give situations in our life to be. Compassion can help alleviate the situation, right? So often people that are feeling empathy, if they haven't done their own healing in their life, or if that is triggering through that energetic field their own uncomfortable or unresolved feelings or their own traumas, then that energy and motion for that person holding space for you or trying to say the right thing or trying to alleviate that is really a result of their dysregulation within themselves. So they're wanting to fix you so that they feel better. It's actually a covert form of self-soothing. So be really aware of that. If you're around somebody that's grieving and you're feeling all of this energy and motion and these emotions and maybe triggering situations from your own past, or the fact that you don't know how to deal with it because maybe you haven't quite experienced grief personally, just try not to make the situation better. Try not to say the wrong thing. This is the foot in the mouth situation that often happens. And really all that person needs is for you to hold their hand and let them express whatever it is they want to express. And I can tell you now that this hurts is a complete sentence. This is excruciating is a complete sentence. This fucking sucks is a complete sentence, right? Nothing needs to be added, and you don't need to respond. You just need to hold the space to allow that person to feel. One of the biggest mistakes we make is by turning away from pain because it's horrible. We don't want to feel pain in life, but pain in life is inevitable. Suffering is optional. It's that old saying that it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved. And this is the human experience. Everyone that we love is going to leave us one day, or we're going to leave them first. And so to love and to live with an open heart and to live life to its fullest goes with loss. And we don't want to think about that. We don't want to accept that reality. And often it's not until it's right in our faces that we're dealing with actually what it means to be human and to have this human experience and this soulful experience on this planet. So the first thing to understand is whatever you're feeling, you're absolutely right. No one can take this experience away from you. Everything you're thinking and feeling is normal, it's natural. Unfortunately, we live in a cultural society today where we're given timelines. Even the medical establishment themselves says that if you're still grieving after 6 months, there is something wrong with you and maybe you need medication to help you through this. While medication may be able to alleviate some of the suffering in the short term, it really does numb the emotional body and it suppresses the actual energetic feeling and this connection to our body and mind. And if we avoid our grieving process, if we repress our anger, if we repress the totality of all of our human emotional experience, then that drives inward, that energy turns inward, and through that process we may end up with a bit of an illness because the body and the mind are intrinsically combined. What we're experiencing in mind, what we're experiencing in our heart, what we're experiencing in our soul will over time begin to manifest in our physical body. So this is the big secret to grief. You can't avoid it, you have to feel it. And by leaning inward, by leaning toward it, you can learn to find some level of comfort zone within that experience, as oddly as that sounds. You can make grief your friend that is going to be there when you need to feel and experience what it is that you're experiencing, instead of running away from that friend because it's always going to be there. So learning to make peace with what is really one of the antidotes here. It's normal for us to want to get in and rescue and save. And if you're someone supporting somebody through grief, don't do that. It's not your journey. What you can do is rise up into compassion. Compassion means I'm here, I'm holding space, there's no right or wrong, this is your journey, I'm going to love you and hold you through this. And, you know, to become a compassionate being on this planet is a journey in itself. It requires a lot of spiritual and emotional intelligence because we have to move through those levels of empathy where we want to get in and rescue and save and avoid, up into compassion where we can just fully be in an open heart holding space for one another. Buddha said life is suffering, and the way to escape suffering is to embrace impermanence. And what he really meant by that is that while we can't avoid or remove certain things in our lives, we can learn to be present with them and to keep our hearts and our minds open in the experience of what it means to be human. Learning to be present with your pain, learning to sit with the pain is essential. It's important to turn inward, to acknowledge and honor what it is that you're experiencing. There is no right or wrong to what you're going through. If you try and avoid, if you follow a prescriptive order of the stages of grief or what you should be feeling at this point in time and what you shouldn't be, and then therefore there's something wrong with you, right? If you aren't moving through or progressing in the way that other people or the textbooks tell you that you should, then that's going to actually mean that you're going to make yourself wrong in some way. That's going to prolong your suffering. So suffering is really a whole bunch of things. It's not acknowledging what you're feeling. It's putting a smile on your face and pretending as though everything's okay when it's not. It is ruminating on what you should have done in the past. that last conversation, the last moments that you had. And that is often a stage that some people go through. It's making a contract with God, it's bargaining. That's one of the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross identified. Nothing's going to change this. Nothing's going to change this. And going through this experience and having compassion and allowing everything to be is actually what's going to help you slowly and gently over time heal your heart and allow yourself to feel some semblance of joy and happiness in the future. One of the things that I often see is that people will hold on to their grief and their pain because it helps them identify with the love and the memories of that person. They don't want to let that pain go in some way because they feel that to experience pain and to keep these feelings and these emotions alive is somehow creating a bond that we've currently lost in this world. And what I have seen a lot is that people will sabotage themselves in terrible ways where they're no longer taking care of themselves or their needs and their basic needs, all those little things that are actually going to make them feel slowly, tiny in a microscopic way, better over time. And this is where often people will do all sorts of things to themselves. They'll start drinking, they'll start eating crap, they'll start avoiding things that may, in some small way, give them a temporary moment of relief. And it's like a form of self-punishment often. And, I've long believed that we don't honor the people that have passed by destroying our own lives, our relationships around us, or our worlds. We honor them by doing our best, by keeping the love alive, by keeping the memories alive, not avoiding those things, and by moving through gracefully and finding some level of peace with the new transformation in your connection with these people now. Because, they're not gone. They're gone from this world, but they do exist somewhere else, and nobody wants to hear that in these early stages. There's no level of spiritual wisdom or self-help that's going to alleviate this. And this is another mistake that a lot of people that are trying to support people in grief make. Everything happens for a reason. There's a lesson in this. This is going to help you grow. You're going to be better as a result. I mean, that is the most condescending crap that you could say to somebody while they're going through this. Some other unsolicited advice that is really the result of somebody trying to help you in some way. It's, well-meaning, but again, if you're supporting somebody, don't give unsolicited advice, right? It's not up to you. You're there to hold space and be compassionate, not empathetic, where you're trying to fix or solve this problem. It can't be fixed, and it's not ever going to be solved, right? But one of the things that we often say is, hey, there's a meaning for this. There's a reason for this. Well, you're in the throes of grief. There is no freaking meaning. And, if we try and get into those spiritual levels of what I call spiritual bypassing, where we're trying to avoid the pain and come up to this higher state of being to see a bigger picture in life, it just doesn't work in the short term. It just doesn't, because as you're experiencing these feelings and these emotions, it's very real. And if we try and spiritually bypass, what some people end up doing is getting very angry with God, angry with the Creator, and that can create a disconnect within their own spiritual well-being as well. So it's not about trying to understand this in a logical sense. There's no logic. There is no logic. There's no words. There's no language. This is a feeling, kinesthetic experience that must be totally honored and totally appreciated for the loss that you have. Last year, when I was in Bali, I met this woman who was staying at the same place as me, and she was the first female funeral director of a big company in New Zealand. Can you believe that it's still been a patriarchal thing, which is kind of strange, but she was the head of this big funeral company in Wellington, and her and her wife and I had breakfast every morning. And I just loved hearing about her job. She told me that she has the best job in the world. I've got goosebumps saying that because, I was so interested in that, and I was like, tell me more, tell me more. And she said, I get to experience love every day. And I feel a bit emotional saying that, because isn't that a beautiful way to spin, what other people might think is the worst job? She said, I get to experience the love that people have. The more they grieve, the more they feel, the more traumatic this experience is for them, the more they've loved. So again, it's not about avoiding and suppressing and eating or drinking or, getting rid of our pain in any way. It's about allowing the feelings of love to still be there. That's how you honor the people that have gone. It's how you keep that connection going. You keep that connection through your love. And this in the quantum field is an entanglement that doesn't die just because a material physical body has gone. This is an energetic feeling and experience that we maintain through keeping our hearts open and allowing the feelings of love to be there. So she taught me a lot about grief over that week that I was hanging out with her at the breakfast table, and I took every opportunity I could to learn more about her view on her job and her role in this life and her life purpose. And this is another thing that people often say, oh, you'll find meaning eventually, turn your pain into purpose. All these spiritual contexts completely go out the window during an experience like this. So forget about them and don't even think about things like that. And if you're trying to support somebody going through it, just zip it. Absolutely zip it. The most powerful question you can ask somebody that's going through grief is, what can I do for you? What do you need? And sometimes our own level of hopelessness and not knowing how to support somebody makes us put our foot in our mouth often. And, one of the greatest things that we can do is just show up, hold their hand, sit in mud with them, so to speak. And if we feel like we have to do something, instead of giving unsolicited advice or trying to, fix the situation, cook a meal, drop it off at their door, and text them to say there's a meal at your door, right? You don't even need to interact if it's not appropriate, particularly for people that are on the periphery of grief. Sometimes we don't want to intrude. Sometimes people need people. Sometimes they might need you to intrude. So everybody has a unique way of dealing with it. And again, the most powerful question you can ask is, what can I do for you? What do you need? And whatever that person needs, you just respond to without trying to fix or alleviate that pain or that suffering. Over time, and that timeline is different for everybody, the heart begins to heal. And then comes these other layers of questions that we often have, like, is it too soon to? When is the right time to? And this is really referring to, cleaning out that bedroom or removing their clothes or moving house or changing life that in some way might remove the memories of the person that we've lost, rearranging photographs, all these little tiny things depending on who that person is. There's going to be this natural stage where we kind of think, oh, society thinks that I should have removed the wardrobe by now because it's been 2 or 3 years, right? Or when is the right time to date again or to love again or to even consider getting pregnant again if it's a loss of a child or having another child? There is no answer to that. If doing something doesn't feel right, if it causes anxiety, if it causes emotional disruption within your system, it's not the right time. It's not the right time. You work at your own pace. And again, that is where self-compassion comes in. I am going through this experience. I'm going to be gentle and kind with myself. I'm going to allow the waves to be there. I'm going to turn inward. I'm going to honor this human experience that I'm going through. I'm going to honor this love and this deep connection that I have with this soul. And I'm not going to try and avoid what it is that I'm feeling. I'm going to turn inward and allow those things to be. That is the greatest piece of advice I can give you. Because when we start following these jolly prescriptions in life and the stages of grief and, you should be out of it, in 6 months according to the medical model, get screwed. All of those rules are just rules that somebody else has made up. You get to make up your own rules here. It's so important that you make up your own rules, and also that you create clear boundaries with other people that are overstepping the mark and making you worse and making things worse for you. Sometimes depending on our different personalities and our own archetypes, we'll be sitting with people, or we'll keep putting ourselves in a situation where we're around people that just keep saying the wrong thing. And we might sit there and smile and accept what it is, and we might kind of override what they're saying by saying, oh, they're just trying to help, they're just trying to be supportive. Meanwhile, we smile and pretend like everything's okay when it's actually not. And what can happen as a result of that is that the rage and the pain is then internalized more and suppressed and stuffed down even more. And really what we need to be doing in those situations is to strap on some self-worth in those moments and to say, I don't need this right now. I appreciate that you're trying to help me. I appreciate that you want this to go away, but I need to feel this right now. And what I need from you is, right? What I need from you is to let me go through this. What I need from you is to check in occasionally, but try not to fix. What I need from you is to hold my hand and let me cry, let me scream. Let me try and process this in a raw and primal way that only I need to experience, right? And so having these clear boundaries of, this isn't working for me, you're making it worse, this is what I need from you, right, is really, really important in these moments for you to create an experience that is going to be helpful and not one that's not going to be helpful. It is critical also to choose the people that are worth training up, right? If you see somebody at the post office or the bank when those things were a thing, and that person is aware that you're going through grief, you might just want to, do whatever you can to get through those brief moments. But there are going to be people that are close to you that are going to get it wrong. That is inevitable. You can't blame them. They're just doing their best as well, right? Keep your heart open in those situations, but choose the people that are worth training, and then create the boundaries around what it is that you need, and have the guts to communicate what your needs are. This is all about you right now. It's not about somebody else going through the same shared grief experience, because it's shared in a way, but it's still unique to them. It's not about having a sense of, my grief's more than yours, or you don't deserve to grieve as much as I do, my pain's worse, my suffering's worse. It just perpetuates, and it doesn't honor, and it actually creates a lot of destruction in our families instead of compassion. What we need is to be able to just have our individual journeys. Some people pass through grief really quickly. Other people don't. There's no timeline, there's no right or wrong. So just because one family member has moved through and is laughing again, right, doesn't mean that they're wrong, right? It means that they're dealing with things in a different way to you. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you because you haven't moved through as fast as society or other people in your family or community think that you should. Again, you've got to make up your own rules here. You've got to find your own blueprint. And one of the things that can help once you've gone through those initial months of grief and shock, right? And, again, your brain's not functioning, your nervous system is not functioning. It takes a while for the integration of this new reality to start slowly over time, kind of landing and sinking in. So one of the things that can help, though, is for you to find a way of monitoring your own feelings in terms of, when I did this, when I ate better, when I got that early night, when I watched that movie, when I went out for a walk, when I went out to a family gathering, but I was in the kitchen because I needed to be around people, but not with people, right? When you do little tiny things that actually kind of alleviate a little bit of your suffering, note those down. And over time, you'll create a formula that is going to help you get through the day and the week and the months ahead. Again, that's going to be really unique for each person. So honouring what it is that works for you and discarding things that don't. I've talked to a lot of people recently that have gone through a lot of grief in their life, and I'm always interested to know, for those that are kind of years down the track, how did they cope? What were the things that they did? And one dear friend of mine, he lost his beautiful wife of 24 years. They had an incredible relationship and marriage. They were best friends and comrades in life. And when she passed away, he was a meditator, and he found that what worked for him is he'd wake up in the morning as though it was Groundhog Day. He'd wake up feeling that same sense of loss. So he'd sit in his chair and he would stay there and meditate until he found some way of getting through the rest of the day. He found a way of finding peace within the moment and acceptance of the moment and the reality that he was in. He didn't try and avoid it. He didn't try and distract himself. He found a way within himself to turn inward, to find a sense of stillness within. And sometimes that took, 2 or 3 hours before he could get up from that chair. And that's what he did. One day he told me that the chair that he sits in was by a bookcase, and just randomly, out of nowhere, this book fell from the bookcase. And he noted that when he picked it up, there was a note that his wife had written, he didn't know how long ago. Just so bizarre. And that note was basically a note that was relevant to her having gone. She had had a long battle with breast cancer, so I guess some part of herself thought, okay, I'm going to write this note as though I've gone and hope that someday John might find it. And that was what was there. And I can't share with you what was the intimate details of that, but that gave him a huge amount of just healing and love, because he felt like she was still there in some way and she was communicating. And that is another layer to, I guess, grief, is understanding what our own individual spiritual reference for life is, our own spiritual beliefs and connection. I grew up with a mother that had a life after death experience when I was 6 years old. I'm also very clairvoyant, and I have had a lot of contact with souls that have passed over from the other side, very significant experiences that have related in very real and very tangible results for the people whose messages I was asked to pass on. I won't get into the details of all of those now. There are thousands of books written on the subject of contact with our loved ones. And, sometimes these things help. Understanding that this is a life experience that is like the blink of an eye in terms of our soul and our evolutionary journey. And also understanding, based on the laws of quantum physics, that energy cannot die. The soul is an electrical, energetic field. We are a ball of light. We're a consciousness and energy, and we inhabit this physical body like a vehicle that we embody for a certain amount of time while we're on this planet, right? But what dies in this material world, right, what decomposes and returns back to the earth, does not destroy energy. Energy cannot be destroyed. It transmutes and it takes on other forms. So when the time's right, it may help to go to a healer or a gifted clairvoyant or somebody that actually works with souls on the other side. Sometimes looking for signs in your environment and just going inward and praying and meditating and focusing on that connection with your soul, you might have miraculous things happen around your life. They're always trying to give you signs that they're okay. So pay attention to those signs and keep an open mind to those things. Even if you're an atheist, this is an opportunity for you to expand your horizons and your belief systems, because ultimately death is an experience that we're all going to face and have to deal with multiple times in our life. And we need to find a way really to get through this life experience and give our life some level of meaning. Again, while you're going through this experience, there's no meaning that can be given to what you're feeling. There's no right words I can say. There's no right words a friend or a loved one or even a therapist or counselor can say. On that note, often it really helps to sit with and talk out loud some of the feelings that you're experiencing to someone that's trained to sit in compassion and allow these things to be expressed. One of the things that can be really normal in the early stages of grief is not wanting to be here anymore, going into a state of apathy where we don't care if we eat, we don't care if we sleep. Our brain's so muddled and our energy is just all consumed in this experience and the time that we don't pay the bills, we don't give a toss about certain things. We let certain things slip from our life, and even our personal hygiene and just the basics of things can suffer in those moments. Again, give yourself some time, and over time, just be aware that there are those little things you can do. Getting up, having a shower, brushing your teeth, going for a walk, just, petting an animal, reaching out and just doing some of the tiny little basic things will actually help your physical body cope, which is going to help your nervous system cope. And that's going to help you move through the suffering side of it so that you can alleviate the suffering, right? Again, pain is normal. It may never go away. There needs to be a level of acceptance here, but the suffering and the self-care and how we view this is something that is optional. And you have tools within you to know what is going to work for you. So give yourself time. Be compassionate. Don't expect too much. Don't expect too much of anybody else going through this experience that you're trying to be in support of. Don't put your foot in your mouth either. Even if you're going through grief and your family members are going through grief, don't put your foot in it with other people. Just be mindful of your individual journey and your own experience. Honor that. Honor grief as though it is a temple of love, and remember to turn inward and to not avoid this. This is not a problem that can be fixed or solved or band-aided or avoided. By turning inward, you're able to allow the energy and motion to be processed, to be expressed, so that you're letting this out instead of keeping it in. It's so important also to understand that we have this heart, mind, and soul connection. We are a holistic being having this human experience right now. So we need to learn slowly over time how to integrate some level of coherence between these systems of the totality of who you are. So my advice isn't really anything but you do you. Feel what you're feeling. It's okay. It's normal to sometimes not want to be here. Sometimes suicidal thoughts or not giving a damn is a normal experience. If things get bad, make sure you talk to somebody. But most people that are dealing with grief aren't actually suicidal. They just get to a point where they don't care anymore. So understand that, if you're feeling afraid, if you're feeling as though you need extra help and support, that you're not feeling safe, you must reach out to the right people and share that experience with somebody that's trained to let you know you're not crazy. This is just a crazy experience. Everything that you're thinking and feeling doesn't make you crazy. It makes you human, and it means that you've loved. So be kind to yourself. Make up your own rules. Don't abide by anybody else's rules or the stages of grief. Just be aware that it's a roller coaster, and you're gonna have to ride it. You can't jump off. There's no way of avoiding this. And over time, you will find that your heart heals. You'll find that you will experience laughter and you will find joy again in the future. But it's not a destination. It's a journey that will spontaneously happen in its own divine timing. Just remember, this is not a test. There's no exam to pass. There's no right or wrong. You've got to find that middle ground. There is no two choices here. There's no sitting in mud, rocking in a corner, not coping or functioning at all with daily life, and there's no hero's journey to come out the other side. That is a myth. You've got to find the middle ground so that as things happen, you can experience joy, you can experience laughter again sometime in the future. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to sometimes be triggered to go into this state of non-functioning as well. You've got to find the middle ground. And that middle ground comes from not righting or wronging your individual experience. It's allowing what is to be And it's also, learning how to communicate what it is that you need in order to not have the expectation that you need to be in grief and not functioning, or that you must come out the other side because that's what other people do, right? Find the middle ground, create a unique experience for you, and self-compassion and compassion really for this journey is what's going to keep the love alive, and it's going to help you move through this eventually in your own timing, with your own divine connection to your own self and to your soul's experience. So remember, you make up the rules, nobody else. Lots of love.